A lot of countries measure their power by the size of their army. They also think highly of themselves if they have nuclear weapons or some sort of similar mass destruction weapons. Let's see who the 10 most powerful armies in the world are. Do you have a hint on which one might be the least powerful? Number 10, the German army. Who would have thought that Germany has the least powerful army? The German armed forces are known as Federal Defense Forces, which is the unified armed force of Germany and their civil administration and authorities. The role of the Federal Defense Force, as described in the German Constitution, is absolutely defensive only. Today, the term defense has a wider meaning, not only defending Germany inside its borders, but helping other countries around the world in peacekeeping missions and humanitarian aid during natural disasters. Number 9, the Turkish Armed Forces. The Turkish Armed Forces are the official forces of the Republic of Turkey. They consist of the General Staff, the Land Forces, the Naval Forces, and the Air Forces. The Commander-in-Chief is the President of the country. Turkish armed forces are greater than those of France and Britain combined, with 570,000 men under arms and 429,000 in reserve, plus a robust air force with American fighters. In peacetime, the Turkish armed forces are ready to perform disaster relief operations. Turkish armed forces improved its capabilities on specialized search and rescue missions in order to better cope with large-scale natural disasters. They are also known as a rebellious army because a small fraction of the army rebelled against president and government in a coup d'etat tentative, which then failed to become successful. Before we move on, leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell to be the first watching new episodes. Number 8, the British Army. The British Armed Forces are known as Her Majesty's Armed Forces. They are responsible for the defense of the United Kingdom, its overseas territories, and the dependencies of the Crown. They also promote the country's wider interests, as supporting peacekeeping efforts in the international area, and also providing humanitarian aid when needed. Since the formation of the kingdom, the armed forces have been part of a large number of major wars where the great powers were involved. The Commander-in-Chief, as well as the head of the armed forces, is Queen Elizabeth II. Always Look on the Bright Side of Life was a bit of a British Army anthem. The song, for those unfamiliar, is from the Monty Python soundtrack. Pilots were known to sing this song on missions, and soldiers awaiting rescue from a sinking ship were also heard singing this song. Number 7, the Army of the Republic of Korea. The Army of the Republic of Korea is also known as ROK Armed Forces, and is one of the largest standing armed forces in the world. The Republic of Korea Armed Forces was founded in 1948, right after the country's liberation from the Empire of Japan, which then was called the Korean Independence Army. They're responsible for maintaining the sovereignty and territorial integrity of the state, and also engage in peacekeeping operations and humanitarian disaster relief efforts worldwide. In South Korea, it is required for male citizens over the age of 18 to perform compulsive military service. On the other hand, women are not required to perform military service, but they may volunteer as officers, warrant officers, or non-commissioned officers. South Korean armed forces enjoy a good mix of the avant-garde as well as older conventional weapons. Its capabilities include many sophisticated United States and European weapon systems, complemented by a growing and increasingly more advanced indigenous defense manufacturing sector. For example, by taking advantage of the strong local shipbuilding industry, the Republic of Korea Navy has embarked on a rigorous modernization plan with ambitions to become a blue water navy by the end of 2020. Number 6, the Japanese Army. Japanese military strength is the 6th military strength in the world, even though it is not such a big country. The Japan Self-Defense Forces are the United Military Forces of Japan that were established by the Self-Defense Forces Law back in 1954. The army is controlled by the Ministry of Defense. The Commander-in-Chief is the Prime Minister, since Japan is a unitary state and constitutional monarchy, in which the power of the Emperor is limited to a ceremonial role. Executive power is instead wielded by the Prime Minister of Japan and his cabinet, whose sovereignty is vested in the Japanese people. The Japan's Self-Defense Force have engaged in international peacekeeping operations with the United Nations. It has 3 service branches as Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, and Japan Air Self-Defense Force. What is interesting to mention is that Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution prohibits Japan from establishing a military or solving international conflicts through violence. This makes the Japan Self-Defense Force the most peaceful military nationwide. As of 2005, Japan's military budget was maintained at about 3% of the national budget. About half is spent on personnel costs, while the rest is for weapons programs, maintenance, and operating costs. As of 2011, Japan has the world's 8th largest military budget. Number 5. The French Army. Besides croissants, Eiffel Tower, and champagne, the French are well known for its army, which is an important part of the state. French armed forces embrace in their arms the Army, the Navy, the Air and Space Force, the National Guard, and the Gendarmerie of the French Republic. The head of the French armed forces is the president, or as they say it in French, chef d'armée. The chief of the armed forces is the supreme authority for military matters. As we mentioned, this role was given to the president by Article 15 within the French Constitution. The French armed forces have an estimated budget of approximately $50 billion. The French army dates way back in the day. It has a CV full of immense conflicts and struggles during these years. The French were involved in a lot of missions of colonization, and that made the country to invest in its army more than any other place. Today, the French military is based on the concepts of national independence, nuclear deterrence, peacekeeping, and military self-sufficiency. Since France is a part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, French Army donates their troops and their time to NATO peacekeeping missions all over the world. Number 4. The Indian Army. This next one is impossible to believe, but true. India has the 4th most powerful army in the world. The Indian Armed Forces are the official military forces of the Republic of India. They have 3 service branches: the Indian Army, the Indian Navy, and the Indian Air Force. The Indian Armed Forces have been engaged in a large number of major military operations. They are armed with a nuclear triad and are steadily undergoing modernization with investments such as futuristic soldier systems and missile defense systems. India has one of the longest military histories, dating back several millennia. The first reference of the Indian Armed Forces was found in Vedas and some other epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. The armed forces have some main tasks and missions as to assert the territorial integrity of India, to defend the country in case the country is attacked by a foreign nation, to support the civil community in case of natural disasters, and to participate in United Nations peacekeeping operations in accordance with India's commitment to the United States Charter. The Indian Army is a voluntary service, and the military draft has never been imposed in India. Number 3. The Chinese Army. China is known as the factory of the world. But besides having the world's fastest growing economy for the last 30 years, it also has a very powerful army. The Chinese army is known as the People's Liberation Army because it is a socialist country and everything must be from the people for the people or something similar. The People's Liberation Army is the regular force of the People's Republic of China. Its budget is estimated to be the 2nd largest in the world, according to some sources. But hey, who's getting it in numbers? Their mission is simple and based on consolidating the ruling status of the Communist Party to ensure the country's sovereignty, territorial integrity, domestic security, and to continue national development, to safeguard China's national interests, and to help maintain world peace. They have some peacekeeping missions in countries such as Lebanon, the Republic of the Congo, Sudan, Ivory Coast, Haiti, Mali, and South Sudan. The state president is the chairman of the Defense Commission. Therefore, he can be called as Supreme General of the People's Liberation Army of the People's Republic of China. Number 2. Russian Army. We might have heard this country's name a lot these last 5 years. The country that has won World War II must have a powerful army. The Russian Army, or the armed forces of the Russian Federation, are always competing with the United States Army, but always somehow coming up second. The armed forces of the Russian Federation have billions of dollars of budget, and it updates their military forces every year. It was established by President Boris Yeltsin, a well-known name in the history of the East and West. The Russian army is under the direct control of the Security Council of Russia. They have in their property mass destruction weapons and often trigger other countries into causing conflicts whenever they want. The Sukhoi PAK-FA is one of the latest pieces of jewelry that the armed forces of the Russian Federation purchased lately. Number 1. USA Army. The United States of America Army is the most powerful army in the world. The USA Army has estimated military personnel of 2 million people, fighter aircraft, combat tanks, total naval assets. Its estimated defense budget is $716 billion. The United States Army is the oldest and most senior branch of the U.S. military in order of precedence. The modern U.S. Army has its roots back in the day of the Continental Army, which was formed to fight the American Revolutionary War before America was established as a sovereign country. The United States of America's Army mission is very wide. They define their purpose as to preserve the peace and security for the defense of the United States, the Commonwealths and possessions, and any areas that were occupied by the United States. They also support the national policies and implement national objectives. And last but not least, to overcome any nations responsible for aggressive acts that put peace and security of the United States in peril. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment down below and let us know what you think is the most powerful army. Don't forget to subscribe for new and upcoming episodes.